Hi church family, Pastor Dan here, and to visitors, welcome to our devotional channel here at Rockhampton Baptist. Now we live in a world where we receive advice and instruction from everywhere. You should do this, you should buy this, you should say this, you should not say that, this is healthy and this is not healthy. There's so much advice and instruction, and it's coming at all different angles, from advertising, from your workplace, from family, from friends, from people you know. There is advice and instruction coming around everywhere. What is correct in this? What is true? What do we actually follow? What do we actually listen? What do we actually act on? The truth is that in everything you hear, there are things that are helpful and that you should act on and that are true. And there are things that are false and that you shouldn't be following. Now, our job is to filter out what is true, what is false, what is worth acting on and what is not worth acting on in the moment. Something may be good, something may be true, but to act on it would not be good. Now, there's an interaction between Job and his friends in his time of misery that helps us to really speaks to us in how we are to model this filtering. And in the advice that they give, there is truth and there is things that are false, things that are not helpful for Job, but things that are quite helpful in the midst of all of it. And so as I learning and reading from Job chapter 22, verse 27 about prayer, and that's where the truth hit me there. So let me read you, I'll read a few verses either side to give a little bit of context. Now this is the chapters about Eliphaz's third response to Job. Submit to God and you will have peace. Then things will go well for you. Listen to his instructions and store them in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you will be restored. So clean up your life. If you give up your lust for money and throw your precious gold into the river, the Almighty himself will be your treasure. He will be your precious silver. Then you will take delight in the Almighty and look up to God. You will pray to him and he will hear you, and you will fulfill your vows to him. You will succeed in whatever you choose to do, and light will shine on the road ahead of you. If people are in trouble and you say, help them, God will save them. Even sinners will be rescued, and they will be rescued because your hands are pure. Now everything that Eliphaz says there sounds true, sounds like good advice to anyone who is struggling or far from God, that needs to rekindle and be restored to God. But that's not Job's issue. That's actually not something that he's going through. Everything here is true and is good advice, just not for Job. Most of it here is good advice. It goes through and works out various things about submitting to God and finding peace. But the thing is that we find out in chapter 1 of Job that Job was blameless before God. That Job was faithful. That even though he lost everything and it was all taken away from him, he was faithful in that. He didn't have an issue with money or lust. He knew about peace. He knew about God's instructions. He was restored with God. He knew that God is the ultimate treasure. And that's why God blessed him with all the money and the finances. That's why God blessed him with what he needed. You see, all that was said here was true and was good, but it was not good advice for Job. However, in the midst of this, verse 27, I think, is what Job needed to hear. Verse 27 says, you will pray to him and he will hear you, and you will fulfill your vows to him. In Job's situation, that's what he needed to do. Job was working out how he could get an audience with God and ask God, why Are you doing these things? And get a response from God. That's what Job was desiring. But God, in fact, was saying through his friend, you don't need a response from me. You simply pray to God. Pray to me. I will hear you. And you will follow the vows and promises that you've made. I don't need to respond. Even though Job is looking for something, there's truth in what we have here. Follow the vows and promises that he's made with God. So in all the information and everything that we get, it's our job to filter out what God is saying in the midst of that. There may be good advice and bad advice, but in that, God can use other people to speak to you. So I encourage you to do that. And my encouragement, as Job's, was that when you pray to God, God will hear you. And I encourage that prayer would help you to align your heart and your desires with God. That through prayer, we would understand more of who God is and actually discover the truth that God has for us. That's what true prayer does. So let me pray for you. Lord, I thank you for all that you do, all the grace and mercy that you shower upon us. Lord, even through Job, Lord, we can understand your grace and mercy and blessing. Not even getting to the end of the story there of Job. We can see that your truth, that you're speaking through people, Lord, is sharing the advice that we need to hear. So Lord, we ask today that you would help us to filter what is true and what is not true. Lord, you would help us to listen to you and to be praying to you. And through that act of prayer, that you would help us to align our hearts with you. Lord, align them up so that we know and understand your will and your purposes. Amen. Keep walking with God. Talk to him. Let him talk back to you as you read the Bible. And when he does speak to you, trust and obey. Sometimes he may not speak to you, and he may speak in different ways. But sometimes through the way in which we pray, that will help us to get closer to who God is and align our hearts, which will help us as we're looking for opportunities to bless others in our community and to see what God is doing amongst us. We'll see you soon.